Hi and welcome to another basic Blowfill tutorial. This time I want to show you the modulation matrix. Of course I know that most of you are also interested in the modifiers, but this would be too much for one video, so I split it up to two videos, one about the modulation matrix and one video about the modifiers, and I'm going to upload both videos at the same time, so when you finish this one you can switch immediately to the next one about the modifiers. Okay, so when we talk about matrices in the Blowfill, there are actually two. Here on the front panel you have the user interface with a matrix. So in this dimension we have different parameters of our sound, and in the second dimension we have 4 possible values which you can change. So this is one matrix, and the second matrix is the modulation matrix, which you can find here when you push this button 4 times. In the modulation matrix you can define up to 16 different modulations. You can see the number over here. A modulation is like a wire which goes from a source, which is which generates the value, and goes to a destination, which is the thing you want to change. So you have up to 16 modulations in the matrix, but don't forget that you have 14 more modulations within the other menu pages. So when you go to the oscillator, you can see here a pulse width modulation source. This is additionally to the 16. So you have 16 modulations in the matrix and 14 more modulations in the other menu pages. Or for instance, you can go to the filter, and here you have the panorama modulation. Okay, let's go back to the modulation matrix. Every modulation has 2 pages. On the first page you can control source and destination with these 2 knobs here. On the second page you can change the amount, which is the intensity, how much this source is modulating the destination. It can be a positive value and it can be a negative value. Okay, when you reach the end of the modulation pages, then you see the modifier pages. But please don't get confused, because they look very similar to the modulation pages, but the modifiers are a complete different thing. But as I said before, we are going to take a look on this in the next video. Okay. So you can change the modulations with these 2 knobs here, but also with these knobs. When this LED is selected, you can select the modulation slot with this knob. You can select the source with this knob, the destination with this one, and with the third one you can change the amount. Okay, so let's have a look on the modulation sources. The first value is off. Of course, with this value selected, you can turn off the modulation. The next value is LFO1, which means that LFO1 is modulating something with no effect, or with half the effect, or with full effect, or with a negative effect, or inverse. Then you have LFO1 multiplied with the modulation wheel, which means when you increase the modulation wheel, you get a higher modulation amount, and when the modulation wheel is down, you get no effect. But of course you have also to increase this value to hear a difference. So when the mod wheel is down, even now you have no effect. Okay. The next value is LFO2. LFO2 multiplied with aftertouch, and LFO3. You can also find the 4 envelope generators, the key track, which means when you play lower keys you get lower values as modulation source, and when you play higher keys you have higher values. Then of course velocity, which means how fast you hit the key. Release velocity, which is how fast you release the key. Aftertouch, polyphonic aftertouch, if you have a MIDI keyboard which supports that. I think there are not a lot of keyboards which can do that, maybe the GEM or GEM keyboards. Then of course the pitch band or the pitch wheel, the modulation wheel, sustain pedal, the continuous foot controller, the brief controller via MIDI, and the controllers W, X, Y, and Z. These controllers can be defined in the global menu page. Here you have these pages where you can define which MIDI CC value will be assigned to the controllers W, X, Y, and Z. Okay? So when you have a special controller value like MIDI CC 13, you can select 13 here, and now you can use controller or Control Z as the modulation source. Okay. So the next value here is unisono voice, which is the voice number. The first voice will have a lower value, and with increasing number of voices you get higher values, which can be used, for instance, to modulate the panorama, so that every voice of the unisono will be in a different panorama position. And then you have the modifiers 1, 2, 3, 4, a constant minimum value and a constant maximum value. So you have constant numbers to change the value of one of the destinations. Okay, so let's have a look on the destinations as well. Here you see pitch, which is of course the overall pitch of this machine. Then you can only modulate the pitch of oscillator 1. you can frequency modulate oscillator 1. You see pulse width when you have a pulse shape in the oscillator or the wave within the wavetable. Next one is oscillator 2, which has the very same destinations, and oscillator 3, which has only pulse width because it has no wavetables. Then you can also modulate the level of oscillator 1, the balance, which means how the routing to filter 1 and filter 2 is balanced. And you have level and balance also for oscillator 2 and 3, for the ring modulation and for the noise. Here you can see the modulation destinations for the filters. Here filter 1 cutoff and resonance, frequency modulation for the filter, drive amount, the panning, and the same values for filter 2. You can also modulate the overall volume of your patch. You can even change the speed of LFO 1, 2 and 3 by modulation. Then you can also modulate attack, decay, sustain and release for all 4 envelope generators. M1 means modulation slot or modulation 1. So you can change the intensity of the modulation for the modulation slots 1, 2, 3 and 4. So let's say we have a modulation 2 with LFO 1 routed to pitch, and we leave it to no modulation. Then we go here and and modulate the amount of the second modulation by LFO2, which means LFO2 is controlling how much LFO1 is modulating the pitch. By this trick you can chain multiple modulations and modulate the modulation which modulates another modulation. It can be very complicated if you want. Okay. And the last two destinations are wavetable and sample. This is of course only able or enabled if you have a wavetable selected or a sample selected. This modulation destination means that you can change really the sample program within one oscillator. So let's say you have one sample program with a piano and another one with drum sounds, and you're modulating this destination. Then you change from piano to drum sounds and back. And if you have a wavetable, you can really switch between different wavetables. And don't get confused, because you have another wavetable destination, but this one is changing the wave within one wavetable. And this one here is really changing the wavetables. So you can get a multi-dimensional wave, if you want to call it like that. Okay, that's all. If you want to learn how to what the sources and what the destinations do, you can select, for instance, filter 1 cutoff, put it to a middle position, and then trying to modulate it with different sources and different amounts. And if you want to know what the destinations are, you can, for instance, choose the modulation wheel as a modulation source, like this, and selecting different destinations. I think that's the best way to learn how to use the modulation slots. Okay, let's go on with the next topic, modifiers, in the next video. I hope you already enjoyed this one, and thanks for watching, and have a nice day.